Today, a victory for Moldova's pro-EU president, Spain picks up the pieces after devastating floods, and Botswana's election delivers a seismic change. From TLDR News, this is your daily briefing for Monday, the 4th of November, 2024. In a blow to the Kremlin, Moldova's pro-EU president, Sandu, was re-elected to a second term in office on Sunday, providing a boost for the country's EU aspirations. The runoff pitted President Sandu against former prosecutor Alexander Stoyanoglu, perceived as more friendly to Russia. As of Monday morning, with the vast majority of votes counted, Sandu had won more than 55%, while Stoyanoglu was on just under 45%. Sandu won the capital Chisinau and dominated among Moldovan voters abroad. Stoyanoglu's strength in other parts of the country, though, means that Sandu's party could face a sizable challenge at important parliamentary elections next summer. During the course of the election on Sunday, President Sandu's national security advisor said there had been massive interference from Russia, which the Kremlin has previously denied. Stoyanoglu himself has rejected the label of pro-Russian and said during the campaign that he supported European integration but also wanted to develop ties with Russia in the national interest. The election was closely watched in EU circles, and Sandu was congratulated by various EU leaders, including Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, who said she is glad to continue working with Sandu towards a European future for Moldova and its people. Since the breakup of the Soviet Union and Moldova's subsequent independence, Moldova has swung between pro-Western and pro-Russian courses. Sandu has accelerated the country's push towards EU integration, particularly since Russia's invasion of neighbouring Ukraine, and Moldova is currently pursuing EU membership negotiations as a candidate country. There's more on the way, but remember to subscribe and ring bell for more daily briefing tomorrow. Plus, if you want to support TLDR, then check out our magazine Too Long. The link is in the description, and there'll be more details at the end of the video. In Spain, more than 200 people have been confirmed dead and an unknown number remain missing in Valencia, following the worst floods the country has experienced in decades. The disaster began last Tuesday after a period of intense rainfall, which rapidly led to the collapse of bridges and left towns engulfed in thick mud. This has rendered many communities isolated from essential supplies such as water, food, and electricity. In response to the crisis, Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez deployed 10,000 troops to the affected areas on Saturday. As part of the relief effort, the Spanish Navy arrived in Valencia's port early this morning with 100 Marines, helicopters, and trucks loaded with much-needed supplies. The government is also expected to approve a significant financial aid package for the region tomorrow. However, anger is growing among the public regarding the lack of timely warnings and inadequate support from authorities both during and after the disaster. The regional government took hours to send flood alert messages to cell phones when the crisis began. Over the weekend, King Felipe VI and Queen Letizia visited one of the hardest-hit towns, Paiporta, which has seen over 60 reported deaths. They were accompanied by the Prime Minister, but plans to continue to Chiva, another severely affected town, were abruptly cancelled due to an increasingly hostile crowd. Protesters hurled mud and other objects, leading local Valencian parliament members to deem the King's visit a very bad decision. As more rain is forecast for the disaster-affected areas and along the Mediterranean coast, it is anticipated that the numbers of reported deaths and missing individuals could rise in the coming hours and days. On Friday, voters delivered a stunning election result in Botswana, where the ruling Botswana Democratic Party, or BDP, was defeated after 58 years in power. The BDP has been in power since the southern African country gained its independence. However, the party collapsed from 38 to just 4 seats. The election was won by the left-of-centre Umbrella for Democratic Change Alliance, or UDC, meaning the UDC's candidate, Duma Boko, will become the country's next president, replacing incumbent President Masisi, who conceded on Friday. Botswana is the world's second-largest diamond producer, and income from the gems has contributed to turning the country into one of the region's most stable and wealthy states. However, a downturn in the diamond market led to a sharp fall in Botswana's economic growth this year and pushed up unemployment. Incoming President Boko said, "We are an economy that depends on diamonds, so we've got to try and safeguard the goose that lays for us the golden egg in the short to medium term at the very least." Botswana is not the only southern African nation whose founding movements have suffered setbacks this year. In May, South Africa's ruling ANC party lost its parliamentary majority for the first time since the end of apartheid, and in neighbouring Namibia, the long-ruling SWAPO party also faces a tough challenge in elections scheduled for later this month. In other news, Israel has confirmed it carried out a ground raid into Syria, its first during the current war, and said it seized a Syrian citizen connected to Iran. Over the past year or so, the Israeli military has conducted airstrikes in Syria multiple times, usually targeting members of Hezbollah, other militias, and Iranian or Iranian-linked officials. However, this is the first confirmed Israeli ground operation in the neighboring country. The Israeli military said the operation took place in recent months, but did not give exact timings. The man abducted by Israeli forces was named as Ali Soleiman al-Assi, a Syrian citizen from the Saida area in southern Syria. The Israeli military said the detention of al-Assi, quote, prevented a future attack and led to the exposure of the operational methods of Iranian terror networks located near the Golan Heights. Meanwhile, there are reports that Israeli special forces carried out an amphibious raid in northern Lebanon and seized an alleged Hezbollah operative from the resort town of Batroun. The Israeli military is also continuing its offensive in northern Gaza, where it says it is battling regrouped Hamas militants. Northern Gaza has been effectively cut off by the Israeli offensive, and the head of the UN Children's Fund, UNICEF, warned, after a deadly weekend of attacks, that the entire Palestinian population in North Gaza, especially children, is at imminent risk of dying from disease, famine, and the ongoing bombardments. In our final story today, we discuss a petition to recognize an Ecuadorian forest as the official co-creator of a song. The groundbreaking proposal, which will be submitted to Ecuador's Copyright Office by the More Than Human Life Project, is the first legal attempt to recognize an ecosystem's moral authorship of a work of art. It relates to the composition Song of the Cedars, which contains melodies of echolocating bats, howler monkeys, rustling leaves, and more, recorded in the Los Cedros forest in northwestern Ecuador. It was created by a group of musicians and academics during an expedition for a book about rivers and the rights of nature movement. Writer Robert McFarlane said, "It wasn't written within the forest, it was written with the forest. This was absolutely and inextricably an act of co-authorship." The move comes a few years after Los Cedros was granted legal personhood by Ecuador's Constitutional Court in 2021, in order to cancel mining permits in the reserve. Whether the request is granted ultimately depends on whether its legal personhood means that Los Cedros can also be granted the moral authorship of a song. If granted, the forest will not receive royalties, but the song's creators have said that all income earned from streaming will go towards a fund for the forest's protection. Now, we discussed the Moldovan and Botswana elections earlier in today's episode, and we'll have a whole load of US content coming out throughout the week too. If this is something you enjoy, then you should check out Too Long, the 2024 election special. For those of you who don't know, Too Long is our physical magazine where every 4 months we dive deep into the stories we care about and you should know about. The next issue, set to be published on December the 1st, will run through every election that happened in 2024, a year shaped by landmark elections across the globe, from the UK and US to elections in Bangladesh, Indonesia, Mexico, Rwanda, and the biggest democratic exercise in history in India. It's not just elections either. The next edition of Too Long will also discuss the first months of the new Labour administration in the UK, unpack the successes and failures of the Biden administration, ask why Europe feels so leaderless right now, cover the ongoing conflicts in Ukraine and Israel, and much, much more. You can pre-order your copy now at toolong.news. Better still, you can also subscribe to get 25% off every copy as long as you're a member, and get every copy sent to your front door or inbox. Plus, if you use the code 2daily, you'll get an additional £2 off your order, which could bring the price down as low as £5.49. The link's in the description, and thanks for your support.